And we're live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pillars 3 AIB Advisory Committee for College and Career Readiness. This afternoon, we are going to be discussing IRCs, Industry Recognized Credentials and CTE Pathways. I'm Olivia Pearson, College Readiness Supervisor for Prince George's County Public Schools, and I serve as the chair of this committee. We're going to take a minute to allow each person on the committee to introduce themselves, and then we will introduce our guests or have them introduce themselves as well. So I will defer to the co-chair.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Dave Harper, Chesapeake College on Maryland's beautiful Eastern Shore, and passing to Kirkland Murray.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kirkland Murray, the local workforce development director in Anne Arundel County, also president of the Maryland Workforce Association. I will pass it over to Robin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Werner. I'm the CTE supervisor for Talbot County Schools.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Banyas. I'm a former student member of the Howard County Board of Education and current sophomore at Duke. I'll pass it to Christy Dreyer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christy Dreyer, Vice President of Academic Programs at Cecil College and the current chair of the M4CAO group, which is the academic VP group in the state of Maryland. I will pass it to John Strickland.
Oh, hi, I'm John Strickland. I work for the CTE committee. I am the expert review team manager. So I'm here in support of Molly and the CTE committee and Richard. I'm going to pass it over to Richard.
Thanks, John. I am Richard Kincaid. I'm the Senior Executive Director of College and Career Pathways at MSDE. Work very closely with our friends at the CTE committee, Rachel, Molly, and John. And happy to be here to present on proposed IRC definitions today. Molly.
Thank you, Richard. Molly Mesnar, Deputy Director of the CTE Committee within the Governor's Workforce Development Board, and always happy to join this advisory committee's meetings, and excited to present and get some of your feedback today. Forgot to pass it. Okay, Adam Perry.
Hi, I'm Adam Perry. I'm the acting CTE supervisor for Washington County Public Schools. I'm not sure who to pass it to next.
I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Libby Diamond from the AIB. Happy to be here. Rebecca Brandt, I'll pass it to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Brandt, Director of CTE for Charles County Public Schools. I'll pass it to Sharon.
Hi, thank you. I'm Sharon Fector. I am formerly the Interim Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at Montgomery College. I'm now serving as a Special Assistant to the President for Institutional Initiatives, and I will pass this to my colleague Genevieve from MCPS.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sharon. Genevieve Floyd. I oversee career and post-secondary partnerships with MCPS. And Kamari, have you done?
I have not. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Kamari Collins, Vice President for Student Success and Enrollment Management at Chesapeake College. Did everyone go? Did I miss anyone?
I thank
Olivia?
everyone.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Kamari, and all of our committee members and invited guests. I'm going to see if Rachel A. with the AIB has any updates for us. And if not, we're going to go right to Richard and Molly for our presentation.
Thanks, Olivia. This is Rachel Amstutz, Policy Director at the AIB, and I am glad to be here. I don't think I have any updates because we just recently met, and this is a special meeting to finish the conversation from last time. I do just want to remind and reintroduce that we have a new policy analyst on our team. So Libby Diamond is joining today and will be at all of our future meetings as well. And so Libby's here to help support as well. So great to see everybody. I can take any questions if there's anything on people's minds before we get started with IRC.
I
think we're
think we
good.
are good. Thank you so much,
Excellent.
Rachel. Okay, Molly and Richard, again, thank you so much for joining our meeting today and agreeing to present to us on IRCs and the IRC definition.
Great, thank you. I am going to share my screen. Is that showing up for you all?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so as you all know, we are here to present today on industry recognized credentials. And hold on here, there we go. You all are very familiar with the blueprint. We don't really need to reiterate, the intended goals of the blueprint, but I do like to include this, especially since the AIB, recently posted their updated comprehensive implementation plan, which really, again, just highlights the pillars, but also what are the intended outcomes and goals of the blueprint. And, I will just point your attention to number 4 here. Participation in a post-college and career readiness pathway increases equitably across all student groups, and 45% of high school graduates earn valuable CTE industry credentials or complete the high school level of a registered apprenticeship by the 2032 school year. And so today, we're really diving into what is that portion of the 45% goal. On paper, that probably seems pretty straightforward, right? Credentials and apprenticeship. But as you all are very familiar, these things require, definitions. They require criteria and approval. So, over the last several months, starting probably in the summer and fall, really working with MSDE on, how do we define these industry recognized credentials? Richard can go into it more, but MSDE, has their approved list of industry recognized credentials. And, with our collaborative work together, it became clear that, there couldn't be one list for the blueprint and then one list that MSDE recognizes, right? We are all working here on a collective goal together and really with the intended outcome of having students connected to valuable industry recognized credentials. And really what that means is, a credential that is valued by their future employers. And so as part of that, this kind of just talks about the collaboration between the CTE committee and MSDE. Additionally, back in the fall, we also entered into an MOU with MSDE on the Perkins Plan development. So, really defining and coming up with a process for these industry recognized credentials is coupled really well with the Perkins State Plan development that's ongoing at this point right now as well. Richard, I'll turn it over to you to kind of talk through, how we looked at best practices across the country and take it from there.
Yep. So thank you, Molly. Yeah, so one of the things that we recognized early on is industry recognized credentials. For you all that have worked in the CTE field for any time at all, know that IRCs are deeply embedded within the programmatic work that we do. And so high quality programs of study, include post-secondary credit, industry credential, work-based learning opportunities. These are things that are part of the system. And so just sort of a nod to that element, there are a number of states that have been doing industry recognized credential definitions, data collection, and approval processes really quite well for a long time. And so one of the things that MSD and the Governor's Workforce Development Board, of which the CTE committee is a part of, really wanted to do a national survey of how IRCs are defined, really understand their processes and any procedures. And so these are the states that we leaned into. And then those that are highlighted blue, Delaware, Florida, and Texas, those are the ones that after sort of doing this landscape, really leaned into, because these states are the ones that really have robust systems that really have sort of persisted over the course of time. And so these are the areas where we really, took a deep dive into that work. And so on the next slide, knowing that work, we also, in consultation with, states that have been doing this a while, really wanted to get a clear understanding of the process. Not only how, from the inception, we needed to think about defining the system, but also as this rolls out, really best practices and maybe some of the lessons learned that other states had rolling these new definitions out, so that we can learn from those without having to, touch the stove and burn our hand, right? We could go into this already anticipating some of the areas where we needed to provide additional support, additional feedback, or build in processes from the front end. And so this is the high level view of really how we intend on moving forward to implement industry credentials, beginning at the very beginning with defining the terms, getting that feedback, which is what we're doing now. The next step will be outlining the specific process. So once we know what IRCs are, what's the process that we're going to use to determine which ones are on that singular list that Molly had referenced for the state of Maryland? Then sort of testing the process, like making sure that it works, putting it in front of people who are going to use this every day to make sure that we've sort of pressure tested it, and then moving on to full implementation. And so later on in this presentation, we'll put this to a timeline so you can see that we're not asking you to pivot overnight. We know these things take time. We want to collect the feedback. We've built those feedback loops in. And so it's going to be really critical that along the way, you all partner with us, collectively to make sure that this is doing what we need it to do.
Absolutely. And before we kind of enter into, what the proposed definition and core criteria are, I would just piggyback all of that by saying, this is what the original draft was that we presented to the CTE committee at the end of November. And they adopted it in order for us to move forward with, okay, here are the core characteristics. So now we need to develop this process, right, for how to assess something against these characteristics. And so what you're seeing today is that original iteration, but through, the survey that's opened up, through presentations that we're doing, just like today over December and January, and as well as just sort of informal meetings and conversations and so forth, several themes have risen to the surface. So, what you see today is certainly not what the final product is going to be. And so, and we've appreciated, a lot of you have already provided us feedback, and we've appreciated that as well. And so just know that a lot of those familiar themes are, have definitely, been in consideration for us, and, changes to come. So, and the other thing I did just want to add, looking at the other state models, is that sort of like a theme throughout all of them is, there was a lot of state workforce board development engagement, as well as like local workforce development boards. And so, you could definitely see how the intention of the blueprint in us working together, is already being mirrored in other states. So I hate reading from a slide in a presentation, but I do think it's important just for everyone to kind of let this sink in. And so I am just going to read from this slide our original proposed definition. So an industry recognized credential is a formal validation of an individual's skills and competencies that align with the state's in-demand occupations and is recognized by industry and employers. It includes a certification, license, or other credential and is obtained through an assessment process, may be stackable and portable with industry, and leads to documented positive employment and wage outcomes. The IRC ensures relevance to the labor market and supports career advancement and economic development. So that is the original proposed definition. As I said, we've been collecting feedback, and so we've got a couple iterations, just based on some themes. But since the survey for feedback doesn't close until tomorrow, that's just not something that we can, present at this moment. But basically, we took this definition and then broke it down into, okay, how do we actually measure that? What are the characteristics of this definition? And, before Richard kind of walks through these 10 criteria, I would also just add that, in addition to some of them being edited, they're not all likely going to be mandatory or required. through this survey process, and also looking at the other state models and processes and rubrics that they have in place, you know, some of these may be mandatory, but some may be sort of optional or nice to have, or can you hit, you know, one of these three group? So that's sort of the process that we are, you know, currently evaluating. So Richard, I'll let you kind of talk through the criteria here.
Yeah, and so if you haven't completed the survey, there will be a link at the end of this presentation for you to provide feedback. And one of the things that I would consider to be the most important part of that survey is we ask you to identify these 10 criteria and rank order them. Because what we want to be able to do is, to Molly's point, determine if all 10 are necessary, or sort of what that bright line is. Do you need to meet 5 and the others are optional, like which ones? All of these things are on the table, but based on the definition and based on the states that we leaned into, these really are the components of, say, a checklist or a rubric that really presented themselves across the entire sort of landscape analysis that we did. So the first 3 on this, you know, aligns with in-demand occupations. We lean into the Governor's Workforce Development Board and how they define in demand. And based on that, we want to make sure ultimately that students are earning an industry credential that will then give them preference when they move into post-secondary. So post-secondary being work, college, military, whatever their pathway is, the IRC gives them advantage within the industry. The second is validated by industry. And so, you know, gone are the days when, you know, a salesperson can show up and say, you know, I have this credential that's been validated by some industry somewhere. We want to make sure that these are validated by industry in Maryland, validated by local workforce boards, literally the people who are doing the work, making sure that they are looking at the industry credential and saying, this is of value to us and should be leaned on and prioritized within schools. Third, it needs to have some sort of assessment that allows students to show either skills or knowledge or both, able to demonstrate that they have mastery of specific skills. And so some IRCs lack this component. Moving forward, we believe it's a critical piece in our selection process. Next slide, please. Needs to be standards driven. So we need to be able to look from an education perspective, how we're linking these up to the programs that are being taught within schools, but then also that they reflect current needs and practices within the industry. 5 needs to be achievable and accessible. These are high school students that we're working with, and not every industry credential is going to be appropriate for a student under the age of 18. And so this becomes part of that criteria, making sure that our students that we're putting this in front of can actually do this. It also speaks to MSDE and CT committee needing to provide supports so that LEAs can, and community colleges can look at this with eyes wide open and understand where modifications or any sort of accessibility concerns could be flagged so that students are properly guided into these programs as well. 6, they need to be stackable, so lead to additional training along the way. Next slide. Portable, we want to make sure that, you know, it's not just a credential that's good for one county. We want to make sure that it's good across the state, and even better, being able to make some of those linkages, knowing that some of our counties, you know, our students may live in Maryland, but they may work in Delaware or West Virginia or in DC. We want to make sure that this is a portable credential. We also want to make sure that there's some sort of quality assessment. And so this assurance that there are measures tied to industry standards, those are frequently evaluated so that we know that an IRC is a mark of excellence for that industry. We also want to make sure they're renewable. I always get scared to death because my grandma took a driving test like 25 years ago and she's 94 now and has a driver's license. It's absurd, right? So industry credentials really should operate in the same way. We want to make sure that students, you know, are upping their game, they're retaining the knowledge, they're able to demonstrate those skills time and time again. And so that renewability piece is important. And then 10, documented outcomes. This becomes a little bit hard and it's going to require our best thinking on how to measure this. But we want to make sure that if an industry says this is a valuable industry credential, it will give student preference, that there's actual data to back up the fact that it does give preference and it does lead to a good job for students moving into this field. So being able to document those outcomes will be an important criteria, I think, moving forward. Next slide, please.
As Richard touched on, sort of one of the most important questions in our survey, I shouldn't say any question is more important than the other, but one that has been very valuable is everyone's input on, of these 10 criteria, which ones do you think are essential? And so here's sort of like a sneak peek of the survey responses we've gotten so far to date. Of which ones people are sort of saying, yes, this one should be mandatory. And obviously at the bottom here, there's an other write-in category. So, that's something we'll look into. But, just to kind of give you an idea of the criteria, which ones are kind of standing out above and maybe weird. So this is going to help guide us in that. Here is, just the current timeline that, we've been working through. And so basically over the last 2 months, we've been reviewing survey results, sort of incorporating that feedback, highlighting themes and so forth, and bringing that to the surface, both in sort of that draft document that you've all seen. I think it's like a 10-page report. And then also a lot of the feedback is honestly regarding the process. So, kind of taking all of that feedback as well, that's kind of separate from the definition and core characteristics and, thinking through that when we're developing the process. And so, we've been workshopping, okay, if we take the 10 criteria, like how do we actually measure this? What's the actual mechanism for these? And then, we're going to be finalizing that process. And basically the plan is, we'll be working CTE committee and MSDE on doing that, and then assessing, the final list of, or the initial list of credentials that'll be approved, with the plan of putting this all together as a package in front of the CTE committee at their February 28th meeting at Montgomery County. Thank you, Genevieve Floyd, for hosting. So yeah, and then after that, basically sharing that list. And then, I think timelines, we're still working through everything, but, there will be an open application for, if there is a credential that's not on the list that someone, wants to apply and, have it go through the same rubric and process. So that will open up. And, but, we got to keep ongoing stakeholder feedback and engagement, and, to help inform, better systems and processes as we are, really finalizing everything. So
if I could jump in on that really fast, because putting my LEA CT director hat on, I get angsty on
yes, thank you, Richard.
So one of the things that I want to highlight is, even though we are presenting an initial list of approved IRCs based on that process in February, and we are publishing, according to this timeline, that approved IRC list in March, this does not mean that we expect you to implement in the 24-25 school year. We're giving you about a year on-ramp so that when we have this published listing, it gives us the opportunity to do a couple of things. There may be some IRCs that don't make the initial cut that a county LEA and workforce board might say, whoa, hold on. There's something really important that's missing here that we need to make sure is included. We want to make sure to have that process so that additional IRCs that meet the criteria that are also important that maybe didn't make that initial list, we have the opportunity to get it right. The second is, we know that implementation takes time. And so what I speculate is a number of, you'll find probably a strong crosswalk between a number of IRCs currently on MSD's current list and the new list. But you'll also find that there are a number of items that fall off, like TSAs, right? And so, don't think of it as like scorched earth, we're starting with all new. Very likely, like there are some very strong IRCs that are being utilized already across the state. Many of them already meet these definition and criteria. So don't think that we're starting from scratch, but also don't think that we expect you to turn your cruise ship around, between March of 24 and this coming August. We know that's not reality. So please know that.
Yes, and thank you. Actually, I had meant to put the school year in. So thank you. Gotta make that edit. But yeah, no, I think that's a really important note because yes, we all see timelines and immediately like anxiety and just going back to the very beginning, we know this is a phased approach. Like we are not expecting things to turn around overnight. We know how long it takes within districts to implement this. So all right. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Looking forward to kind of opening up to feedback. The survey link is in here. Thank you to all of you who have already responded to Dave Harper's point earlier. Yeah, we're happy to kind of take a, collected response from the committee, in written format, whatever's easiest for you all. And, but also for any members of the public, anyone listening in, feel free to reach out to me and I can send you the link or, type in the link from here. And Dave and Olivia, I will also share this, the presentation slides with you all to share with the group as well. And I'm going to stop presenting if that's okay, so I can see.
Thank you so much, Richard and Molly, for providing us that context. I think that helps a lot to help frame and shape the dialogue with the committee. And so I will kind of allow any of our committee members or guests to an opportunity to ask questions, either clarifying questions or provide some feedback.
I'll go ahead and start. Start this. On your first bullet around the IRCs in association with occupational high demand within Maryland, I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind that, especially when you go to Western Maryland and maybe Susquehanna, that we have to look at this as a regional approach too, and look at what's in the region. And also, I'm glad that you guys mentioned a couple of times the local workforce boards, but where it says identified by the governor's workforce board and maybe adding in state, local workforce boards too, because this became very important as we've been working through the state plan and looking at what industries and occupations that are in high demand in the state, but they also are some industries that are in high demands in local areas. So making sure there's opportunity for that local flexibility too, and then that regional flexibility, knowing that people do not look at state lines or county lines when they're looking at employment.
All great points, and absolutely, definitely something, you pointed to the criteria number one that, we've definitely sort of tracked changes, some, local, regional, acknowledging that. So I think those are all great points. Absolutely.
So I brought this up in the feedback form, but I just wanted to bring it up for this group. Where I, as a CTE supervisor, so putting my LEA hat on, I appreciate that Richard acknowledged that having the year, that's big. But where I'm still stuck is I think I could speak for a lot of CTE supervisors when I say that we could pretty much take a good guess as to which programs might have the shifts, right? Like we are pretty well versed in our programs of knowing the ones that kind of fall in this gray area and the ones that we know need better IRCs, the ones that we know. And I think for some of them, there are other options that are similar to the programs that we provide that wouldn't be as much of a shift. But there are a few programs that don't fall under these definitions, but are still very important industries. So computer science was the one that I brought up on the form, on the feedback form. And that's where I'm getting stuck. We have programs in Maryland in a lot of states, and I know Delaware was one on this list. Not everything goes directly to a credential, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good program. And some of our CTE programs are just more college aligned, right? So with this definition, I'm still stuck on what to do with those programs that are more college aligned. And I use computer science as an example because what I shared in my feedback was there's a big push in Maryland for coding and computer science at a very early age because it is an in-demand career. I agree with that. But right now, our programs of study are aligned more towards like AP. And we have dual enrollment opportunities for a lot of our community colleges for computer science, because in most jobs for it, students are going to go to college. And I do know that we have other industry credentials in our list right now. But after speaking with other computer science teachers, a lot of those are they're not attainable by most students. Like most students are going to take the pathway where they would go to college before they would take some of those industry credentials, like Python and things like that. They're very specific. How can we still prepare students for the CTE pathways that are more college aligned in most careers? That was a very long way of me asking that question, but I don't want to lose those programs in the mix of this and us just throw in an IRC to meet the definition, where some of our programs are preparing our students for dual enrollment opportunities. And I know that kind of muddies the waters with different pathways of the post-CCR pathway of CTE versus dual enrollment, but that is where I personally keep getting stuck. And when I looked at Delaware's, they do use AP computer science. They use Project Lead the Way still. So they haven't really identified IRCs other than what we have for our technical assessments. Because I'm looking around these other states, like, what are they doing that's different than us? And I will be full disclosure, I didn't look up every state, but Delaware is one that I am a little bit more familiar with those programs. So I don't know if anyone has the answer, but that's just the thing that I keep getting stuck on with this.
Yep, I'm gonna hop on that one really fast, and then see if Molly has anything that I missed. So I hear you, and that's definitely a concern that if I was in your chair, I would also be thinking through. So a couple of things just off the top. The first is you are going to have CTE programs that do not have an IRC because they are, as you described, they are college prep programs, AB, IB, AP, dual credit, like these sort of things. That's going to happen, right? And one of the things that I will say time and time again is we are in the business of preparing students for life. These are still very, highly valuable programs. They still need to be available for students to be able to take, even if they don't necessarily have an IRC tied to them. So please think about your kids before you eliminate programs like that. The second thing that I'll say to that is the goal is 45%, not 100%. So 45% of your total student population at graduation need to have earned an IRC or participated in the high school level of an apprenticeship program, right? Not 100%, thankfully, right? That means that probably those CTE programs that you have that lead to college fall within that 55% that you aren't counting towards Blueprint. There are other metrics like dual credit attainment and IRC, other post-CCR things that are in play there, right? And so continue to lean into that. And then my third and final thing that I'll say on this is, and this is an area where I've had to retool my thinking as well, right? Because I spent a while as a CT LEA director, and we are almost trained within a school system to think core academics and then CTE, right? They're silos. And what Blueprint is going to force us all to do is think about how we are blurring the lines between academics, college, career, right? You are never going to make your 45% goal if you're only focusing on your CTE kids, right? That's why the Blueprint is so intentional, where it says 45% of all graduates. So while you may not have an IRC aligned to a CTE program, maybe there are IRCs that you could tie to comprehensive arts. So think about your tech theater programs. Think about some of your performing arts programs. How might those relate to an IRC? How might those lead into an apprenticeship program? And so it really is going to force all of the people that have normally been siloed, not only at your LEA, but within this building that I'm sitting in. We have to start thinking, you know, with that you know, line blurring sort of, you know, concept. I think if we get really creative, you're still going to find the value in those college going programs of study, and then also expand sort of the areas and opportunities for kids. So hopefully that addresses that at a very high level.
Yeah, and I just wanted to echo, you know, everything that Richard is saying there. And, you know, also just kind of say for, you know, for the pathways that don't have an aligned industry recognized credential, you know, those are the ones maybe we need to look at, you know, what apprenticeships can we grow in that area and really, you know, focus some of the efforts there. And, you know, I know that's sort of a separate conversation. I know there's a lot of, you know, scaling and so forth to happen there, but, you know, just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit about, you know, is this apprenticeable, and, you know, what can we do to grow in that area as well.
And that's the other piece of it is, for our county at least, those areas are the ones where we're struggling with apprenticeships, because biomed, we're having a lot of difficulties with expanding into our healthcare providers beyond like our CNA programs. Like they're already very saturated with students. Computer science, like we just don't have that on the shore. So that's where we're hitting roadblocks. And I'm just going to make this one point, and I see that Dr. Floyd has her hand up, and I'm going to turn this over to her. The other piece to it, and Richard, I agree with everything that you said, that it's making us think outside the box, and there's other areas, and we've already been exploring that in Talbot of like, what are some areas that students who aren't in CTE but have these, you know, opportunities for industry credentials. I guess my other concern as an LEA supervisor is these programs that don't have an IRC and we're struggling with apprenticeships, those are the ones that are taking the majority of my Perkins funding. So it's like becoming harder for us also to financially afford these programs when we're not showing such a direct alignment to Blueprint. So I just want to make sure that they are protected within this, do you know what I mean? So that we can find ways to still have them, getting creative with other IRCs, but then I'm going to be honest, they're our most expensive programs, at least for me. So I just want to put that plug in this also, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Floyd now.
Thank you. And thank you, Molly and Richard, for sharing. It's always good to see you. Always great to hear from you. And actually, Robin, you touched on a point that I was going to ask about, and that's the funding. But let me ask this question first. Richard, you shared that not all CTEs will have an IRC. Might it be the same on the flip side, that not all IRCs will be associated with a CTE program? Or is that an incorrect statement?
I think what you'll find as we get through the process is we're going to prioritize two things, really. The first, challenge accepted on trying to find industry recognized credentials across all of the programs that we offer, right? My team is already on it. And so what we want to be able to provide you is the most robust menu of options of IRCs that are aligned to programs, right? So that's the first thing. The second piece, dealing with funding, right? We know that Perkins has also been allocated sort of using a 2010 almost Perkins for sort of model, right? The system shifted. The way that we are allocating and designing Perkins hasn't necessarily made that same shift, right? And so, every month my team holds a check-in with our secondary and post-secondary CTE programs across the state. And one of the comments that comes up often is, I feel like I am serving two masters, right? Blueprint and Perkins. And in this interim, I completely, I can see that, right? Like, I can understand how that's the case. What that means is it's on us to fully integrate Perkins and Blueprint, so that we're able to better align the funding. I think when we do that, it opens up quite a bit more funding and access to Perkins that right now, particularly our secondary programs, may or may not have access to. It also calls out specific ways that we can utilize Perkins to incentivize community colleges around related instruction and some of that IRC attainment. Like, there are a number of levers that we have available to pull as we move through this. And so I say that only because know that we got you. There have to be some changes. And as we go through that particular element of the CTE state plan, this is where, our feedback becomes really important, so that we are designing those funding levers in the way that you don't then have to wonder, how am I going to cover the IRCs? And then I guess my little extension to that, there are a lot of funding sources available, right? There's Perkins, there's Reserve, there's Innovation, there's Blueprint dollars, and maybe even some that, session's not over. Who knows what other funding streams will be dreamed up in Annapolis. So, potentially we'll see some of those as well. So, us, putting together a really nice braided funding crosswalk so that you don't have to do the work of figuring out how to pay for these. We're able to show you, if you do this, like, here's a funding stream that you could potentially tap into to help cover. So, just building in that knowledge and resource and increasing accessibility.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Great answer. I appreciate that. The last question, or the next question I have, it might be the last, relates to the core elements, number 2. Molly, thank you for sharing the responses thus far, the 2 that have kind of elevated, and my circle, I see, have elevated for others. But I have a question on the second one, the validated by industry. Let me just go to it so I can make sure I'm reading the right one. Yes. So when you say that it should be validated across the state by multiple employers, is there a minimum number of employers that you're looking for to validate?
So that's going to be part of, sort of the finalized process and how we do that. So at this moment, we don't have a set number, but, that is certainly, I think there's a couple different ways we can look at this. And so that'll be part of it. But if you have, hey, I saw this is how this state did it, and sort of thoughts or suggestions there, we are totally open to considerations. So if you have specific ideas or thoughts in mind.
I don't, but thank you. We were just wondering what multiple represented for you. It could represent different things for different people. So we're just
yes,
clarity.
Well, yeah, a lot of the criteria obviously needs to be, parsed out of like, okay, this is what the definition here is that. And that's kind of what we've been workshopping over this past month is like, okay, of the criteria, here's this 2 words. Like, what does that actually mean? What's the actual definition of that? So that will be, forthcoming.
Okay, and the last part of that sentence says it's often developed and endorsed by industry associations. And so in our interpretation, it means it's not required. It's often, but not mandatory. Is that a correct interpretation?
I would say I would wait on sort of the final produced version, because that is one of the, considered edits, modifications that we've had, whether that word often is correct there, if something else should be in place there. So yeah, I would wait until we release the final.
Thank you.
So Molly,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Kirkland.
Molly, to Dr. Floyd's point, instead of businesses, I mean, we get a lot of labor market data. There are systems out there that provide labor market data that shows what credentials and what skills are needed in a local area. So could that be something that can be used if if we're working with the school system? We just did an application for Anne Arundel for them to look at an industry connect. We ran the labor, we used Lightcast, we ran data to show that that these credentials, someone having these credentials, they are likely to get a job. They're in demand by within the local economy. So could that be something that can be used?
Yes, that is definitely one of our considerations as part of the application process, is, to your point, making sure that there is an opportunity for a local and regional need to be exhibited. And Richard, I saw you unmuted if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so I want to say thank you for calling out Lightcast. We actually just procured that here at MSDE. And so that will be sort of our LMI tool that we will then begin to socialize. So awesome to hear that you all are using that as well. Alignment is everything. And then the second component, I want to highlight, this definition, these criteria will get us to, 95%. It's a made up number. 95% of the credentials that we think need to be on this list. That other 5% are the credentials that are localized or regionalized. And so one of the things that Molly and I talked about early on in this game was we have to have a process that can be utilized to get those additional 5% that are local or regional that may not appear on this statewide list. And so know that as we're considering the process to put forward to the CT committee, that is a component that we are already thinking through to make sure that we have a robust approval process.
That was one of the areas I was going to ask about, because if we use our, I agree with using the initial list, like why restart the whole process? Like we already have a list, like let's evaluate from there. But one thing I thought of is, since that list was created, we've added a new program with ROTC programs, and different ROTC programs have different, ASVAB is what we use for a technical assessment, but that's not really an industry credential, right? Like that's just to see where students' strengths are. But in our program, our Navy program, some sites can be a drone site. So our students actually get trained to get an FAA pilot license in drones, which to me is like an awesome IRC, right? Because there's so many opportunities for being a drone pilot. But right now, that's not on our list because our list is before that, program even existed. So I was going to ask, like, is there going to be some consideration for programs like that? Like, it's not offered in every school system. Only certain ones might have been chosen by their ROC, whatever branch of the military it is, for example, in this program, but it's definitely a worthwhile IRC. Like, how do we handle those others? So you just already hit on that, Richard.
Thank you. And just on this point of the unique and localized, just to plug for community college and workforce board partnerships, because we really are working closely more so than ever through the career counseling MOUs with our LEA friends. And, that Lightcast data that you reference, Richard and Kirk, that's the kind of thing that community colleges use all the time when they're working with the local businesses and funders to make arguments for the programs and to consider what programs are going to start up. So we can be a resource because you already have a set of, embodied in each community college and each local workforce board. You already have a set of localized credentials that are matching that economy in that region. And I think thank Richard also earlier when he was kind of acknowledging that community colleges can be a supplement for IRC instruction. Some college prep programs don't have IRCs embedded in them in the high schools, but there are a good number of programs that we offer that do have IRCs, and we can be a supplement and an ally as LEAs get to that 45%.
And also keep in mind, Richard, you said you purchased Lightcast. We use Lightcast. I know on the shore they use another one, Chamor. So you can actually bounce these up to see, if they all align and things like that. But I would be remiss, from a workforce development standpoint, and as the person that works with businesses day in, day out, the bottom line of this is to make sure that students have the credentials that they can get hired, especially those students who are not going to college. I mean, I look at that 45%, that's really focusing on those kids who may not be going to college or may take a course at a community college and then go right into, maybe a non-credit course at a community college or workforce course at a community college, go right into employment. So again, I think making sure that this is in line with what employers really want and prepare students to go to work. I mean, I know we're all looking at our outcomes and all that, but I think we really, from a workforce development standpoint, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of employers and building a pipeline of skilled workers that they would be ready to hire.
Yeah, and I think you hit on, the purpose and intent and spirit of all of this, right? It's valuable credentials. We don't want kids earning empty credentials that don't lead them anywhere. And so that's really what we're trying to incorporate here in that criteria, in that process and approval process. And but to Richard's point, maybe this is going to hit on 95%, and there are there are going to be opportunities to add, as new opportunities come up. And then, we're going to have to reassess the list at, some sort of frequency of, which ones are, outdated at this point and so forth. So it's going to be ongoing. But, Kirk, again, just appreciate you bringing us back to the original spirit and intention of all of this, right?
Dr. Dreyer, I see you have a hand.
Yeah, just to be brief, I'm going to go back to Kirk's comment that it is critical that it's regional. I mean, I'm an agricultural county. That is probably not a state workforce need, but it certainly is for Cecil County. And so I think it needs to be a very clear process on how we can apply to get something approved, because I think it is very different across the state as to what different states need. And the last thing I'll say, and I know Dave spoke very eloquently about community colleges and all we can do. I think we have a lot of certificates that have multiple IRCs, credit and non-credit, that I think we're going to have to make sure that we petition to get added to a list, because 12 or 18 credit certificate can give a student so many credentials and workforce skills, and not only provide them the ability to be employed at a very good wage, but then also move on if they choose to do so and keep growing. So I think we want to make sure that we those are included as well.
Also like to pick up on something Robin said, because it's very interesting. If a student earns a license, but it's not a credential, where does that fall into this?
So within the definition, licenses are also included, right? So you would have like an industry credential, like a CompTIA, like Network Plus, right? That'd be an IRC. But then also you would get like your CNA or your cosmetology license, which would be stated, both would count within that.
Olivia?
Yes. I just want to jump in when we're talking about IRCs and students that could be for students who are not going directly to college versus students who are. And I think that now in today's graduating student body, we've got students doing everything. And so really putting this all together and recognizing that our students are working, and it's great if they can work while they're in college in their actual industry. I think that them having an IRC going into college, and I'm really grateful that we have all of these community college representatives here, but we have a lot of students who go directly to our 4 years and are utilizing this as well. And so trying to, again, put all of these pieces together to show that if you go to college with this IRC, what your earning potential could be in college versus not. And so I think that there's, even more blending I think we can do. I know I was that kid. I was that kid that graduated as a CTE kid and went directly to a 4-year. And that experience helped shape the work experiences that I was exposed to and the internships that I was able to receive in my 4-year institution. And I know in Prince George's County, we're really working with that. We have a 3D Scholars Program where students are going, they do 2 years at community college, a lot of which they're doing while they're still in high school. Then they transition to their 4-year. And what we found is all of our students who are going through this process are working in their field while they're completing their degree. And so they're able to graduate. They have professional jobs before they graduate with their 4-year degree. It's no debt associated with it. So I think this is an affordable way that students can really go through college, maximizing all of the supports that we have for them as they go through their journey.
Robin?
So I think that, Kirkland brought up a great point that ultimately this is for us to align and set our students up for success, right? Because we don't want to give them credentials or a program that aligns to credentials that aren't going to mean anything in the industry, right? But what I also want to remind everyone is that teachers are the biggest resource in a good program. So you can change your industry credentials so that they are, all of the different experts, agree that they're the best. But at the end of the day, if we don't have teachers who feel comfortable in whatever changes are made, we're not going to be setting students up for success because they are the most important resource. So it's great that we're going to have time to make this shift, but I hate to go back to money, but in order to do this well, we're going to have to prepare our teachers, and keeping in mind that a lot of our teachers who are CTE teachers are not trained educators. They have done an alternate pathway to become teachers. So shifting curriculum for them is not the same as shifting curriculum for some of our more traditional core classes. So it could take them a while, and they're going to need support. And this all depends on whatever program it is, but they're going to need support, and it's got to be more than we're going to change to this IRC. Like, I think we're going to need like a state level of support where teachers can work in collaboration with other districts, because CTE teachers in general are they're the only ones. They're singletons in most schools and even in counties. Like, I have programs where they are the only teacher that teaches that in the whole county. They don't have other teachers to lean into. So I just want to make sure that that is taken into consideration when we do roll this out, that there's going to need to be really good professional learning opportunities for these teachers beyond like, here's the shift. Like, it's going to have to be really well planned out with opportunities for collaboration across the state for a lot of our teachers. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen to see if there's any commentary on the definitions and the characteristics, just as a prompt. The core characteristics and whether any of them rise to a higher level of priority.
And while you're sharing, David, I spoke to that earlier. I'm happy to reiterate the priorities we had, but I do want to just echo what Olivia shared about college and career opportunities. And it's not just an IRC if you couldn't get a diploma or if you weren't thinking about college. We try each year to make sure our stakeholders understand the value that CTE brings, that industry recognized credentials bring, and it doesn't have to be, oh, it's for those, it's not for us. It really is for everyone, and it's such a benefit to all. So sharing that information in a clear and succinct way, it's not either or, it really is and making sure our students across the state understand they have multiple options and opportunities, because what you think you may do now may differ from what you do later. So if you leave with multiple credentials, it's really setting you up for success. And you also spoke about the community colleges, and I would be remiss if I did not overtly thank our community college, Montgomery College, for the work that they do with us. We're working very closely with their workforce development and continuing education group to look at CTE or IRC opportunities for our students right now, not waiting for the list, but getting a jump start to pilot something. What can we offer to our juniors and our seniors that might be of benefit? We're looking at high wage, high skill, high demand opportunities where students can go to Montgomery College and earn these credentials. We have CTE programs, one in every school, but we don't have the same CTE program in every school. And some of them are facility intensive. And when they could go to Montgomery College because they can't get to the CTE center and take advantage of what's there, that's a great opportunity. So I believe all of the LEAs are leaning into that relationship and leaning on that relationship to make sure that we take advantage of what they have to offer so that our students can ultimately benefit from it. But I just wanted to echo what David said about taking advantage of our community colleges, because they provide a great resource to us, and it's a win-win situation. So that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Floyd.
And I'll just add what I said earlier about these core elements. What rose to the top for us were 2 and 4. Is 4 the one that speaks about the students? No, I think it's 5. 5. We have to remember these are 10th, 11th, 12th graders. And so keeping the students in mind while we're developing this, something that they can get into immediately after high school, something that they can access while in high school, we believed was critically important, as well as making sure whatever we decide to do is validated and has input from a variety of individuals. So 2 and 5 were the ones for us.
Thank you, Dr. Floyd. And there's a link if people want to follow to the definitions and the core characteristics dropped in the chat. So you can kind of peruse through them if you want as our conversation winds down, because we'll probably take say 1:20 to 1:30 or so to talk about the next Pillar 3 meetings.
Molly, can you clarify for me, and I apologize if this was in the timeline you were presenting, but after the initial IRCs go to the CTE committee for review, is there going to be, like, are they going to also seek other industry experts, or is that only going to stay within the CTE committee to review? Like, are they going to have like breakout groups by career cluster, or is that further down the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll be probably further down the line because February 28th is, obviously around the corner. But yes, I think to answer your question though, there will be a process for if you don't see a credential on the list for other credentials to be applied for. So that might be a good example where there is an industry association that says, oh, our credential's not here. How can we get on there? And to go through that process. So, I think across the board, if there are, local, if you're talking about your own, LACs and so forth. So I think there's going to be opportunity for more employers and associations and so forth to weigh in.
I think my concern was actually the opposite of a IRC being removed. That maybe I just want to make sure that the CTE committee, before they would make a decision to like remove an IRC, that there would be consultation from industry experts, if that makes sense. Because if I'm thinking about the CTE committee, I don't think that all of them have expertise or experience in every career cluster. So if they review those and go to make some decisions of what they're going to approve, like before something is like totally taken off the list, will there be some process of them consulting someone before removing it?
So part of the criteria is going to be validated by industry. And to Dr. Floyd's point, that is a criteria that I think pretty across the board, most people have considered is mandatory and required. So I do think because of what the approval process will be, that is always already going to be like baked in there. To your point, I mean, to be honest, Richard, you can speak better than I can about this, but I think MSD's current list is like 500. So to go through and say, oh, all these removed, and now we got to go and follow up with the industry association for each, I just don't think that's possible. But I think that is where the validated by industry is going to be an important criteria for us when we're assessing these.
Probably the easiest way to do this is that each of the LEAs work with a local workforce board. Local workforce boards by law are 51% businesses. So if the businesses on the local workforce board said this is a valuable credential, then that should automatically allow it to stay on the list. I mean, if businesses are saying if someone graduates or earns this credential, I will hire them. So it seems like instead of going to all these industry credentials, that's why workforce boards are 51% businesses. So that you're getting that business voice. Understand that workforce development is ultimately the purpose of workforce development is to make sure that businesses have available workforce so they can hire from, and individuals can, get family sustained wage jobs. So
is that a possibility that the local workforce boards could review MSCE's list and give feedback to the CTE committee? That might be a efficient way, like Kirkland said, to have a lot of experts across the state weigh in without the CTE committee being charged with actually finding people and organizing groups. That might be a quick way to get some information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something we can, discuss with MSDE's team. And, again, I'll just reiterate that I think the core criteria validated by industry and so forth, that is really hitting a lot of those marks already. And the recognition, as I've said, and Richard has said, there will be opportunities for, local industry input and labor market data and so forth to be included. So.
I'm thinking about as we are, I guess, proposing any type of feedback as a whole from Pillar 3, this Pillar 3 Advisory Committee. And I think that a piece that keeps coming up in different ways is just ensuring that that is the case. So ensuring that there is an opportunity for regional, local workforce boards to continue to provide, I guess, feedback validation as it relates to what is current in that particular area and able to submit that to MSDE and the Governor's Workforce Board. I think that, to me, has just kind of come through in a lot of different ways. And so as I'm thinking about our feedback, just making sure that that is, kind of written, that's a process that I think for this committee, we want to ensure it maintains, whether it's in progress now, but it's something that is maintained and really ongoing, because as these certifications are updated and we're talking about staying relevant with your certification, that would be the case, with some of these IRCs, like to Robin's point, this whole drone certification. I've been hearing a lot about that lately. And so making sure that there's a process for that to be updated, whether it's locally and also at the state level.
I agree with you, Olivia. I mean, I think one of the easiest way to do this is that the LEAs run their list by the local workforce board and get the local workforce boards to sign off. The businesses on the workforce boards to sign off that these are valid credentials, and then have an opportunity to weigh in if there is another credential that they find valuable that's not on the list. I'm not sure why, again, it goes back to that whole regional stuff. It's great that the governor's workforce board is involved in this, but they're looking at things statewide. I think if you really want to represent what's going on in the local economy, that's why you have local workforce boards, and that's where they can play a big value in this. I know in Anne Arundel County, every time that the Perkins plan is updated, they come to the local workforce board to validate that what they put in the Perkins plan. So I think that leveraging your local workforce boards is probably going to get you that regional input and make sure that's valuable to regional employers. Again, keeping the big picture in mind, we want to make sure that students, if they graduate right from high school, go into workforce, or if they go to college and go into workforce, that they are getting the skills that businesses would hire them for.
Absolutely. And as a border district, so we border DC and we border Virginia. And so that regional piece is really important for us specifically in Prince George's County.
Christy, I see Dr. Dreyer.
Yep. I'm just going to add, well, we border Pennsylvania and Delaware, so we're right there with you. And not only leveraging the LEAs, but the community colleges who also have a lot of IRCs. We need to make sure we keep them in the loop on this as well. Because even those students who are not currently enrolled in high school, we get a lot of immediate high school graduates or those who wait a year and figure out, I need a skill set. So I would say make sure we talk to them as well with our local workforce boards.
So, I mean, I think that this is bigger than just the LEAs. I agree with you, Dr. Dreyer, that this is about community colleges. This is about the funding that the workforce boards use to, to support people in training and things like this. So having this process vetted and making sure that we're all aligned with the same IRCs is very important. I mean,
totally agree. Particularly your comment, you keep going regionally, totally agree.
Well, it's the reason we have the MOUs in place, that we were foreseen as natural partners, because as you seek to kind of connect education to local industry and business, these are these institutions already in place to do just that. And so we're natural partners and glad partners, to help build capacity.
Well, and speaking from an LEA, we also work with our program advisory committees, right? So we have program advisory committees for every program, which have regional experts who advise our programs. I feel like we have all these different committees and organizations, and we need to have everyone on the same page. To me, what would make sense would be if, and this might not be something that is possible to do between now and the end of February, but like moving forward, like long term with this would be to have the workforce investment boards, the local boards hosting meetings where LEAs can invite their PAC members from each program and hosting a meeting specifically about IRCs. And it could be like an annual review almost of what's changed. And that way you get all of the workforce investment boards involved. LEAs are sitting in the room, and then also they're inviting their PACs. And because the PACs are who are advising at the local school level. Like if you don't have all these people together to at least provide input, it's defeating the purpose. And then the PAC just becomes a check mark because we have to for Perkins, so we want to utilize them better. And that's the great thing about Blueprint is I think that it's kind of forcing us to do that. So that we're making decisions. And that also addresses Kirk's regional, emphasis here because we have regional boards. So to me, that would be a long-term, like logistical way to look at this is to kind of have annual reviews of it. And then the LEAs can be charged with inviting their PAC members and seeing who can go. But like for us on the Upper Shore, we have 5 districts that our WIB is working with. So the odds are really in our favor that we would be able to have lots of different industries show up because a lot of our districts are working, just like we don't cross, sometimes talking about this with neighboring states, same thing works with us for our counties. We have kids who are doing apprenticeships in neighboring counties on the shore. So that's why we meet together. We share a lot of these same PAC members. So we might as well put them together to look at this.
Robin, thank you for that, because it reminds me of Richard's comments earlier about aligning Perkins with this work, because Perkins requires the program advisory committees and then the local advisory committee umbrella over that. And because here on the rural Eastern Shore, where Robin and I are neighbors in the country sense, you can only ask so much of people's time. And so that's why we do twice a year with the Workforce Investment Board and our 5 county CTE directors at the college host meals that bring these program advisory councils together to talk about the regional curriculum and all of these different industries. And the college gets a perspective, and then our K-12 partners and their CTE programs can get the perspective. And that conversation drives our LAC, Local Advisory Council report to Perkins. So we're close. We're not quite there, but your vision is beautiful, Robin. So thank you.
I agree with David. Robin, your vision is spot on. I think this is the easiest way to do this, is to bring all these together once a year or every 2 years, whatever, and review these and get feedback.
Well, it's working smarter, not harder, right? There's no reason for Molly and the CTE committee to try to have to find all these people. Like they're there. It's just we need to tap into them, because I think sometimes this goes back to my point about our CTE teachers. Sometimes because they're new, they don't always know the expectations, right? And this is something that's an expectation in Perkins, but it's not utilized to its full intent by every program. This would give every program this is what we need to evaluate each year, and how are we supporting you there? It just gives direction to everyone. We already have these people identified. I think we just need to tap into them and just organize it.
On behalf of MWA, there's a CTE administrative association. This would be a partner this is a way that I think we could partner on doing something like this and bringing in our community colleges.
Okay, so we have about 8 minutes left in this meeting. And I know we want to get to a point where we are starting to wrap up. So is there any other feedback or recommendations we want to elevate before we start talking about our next meeting date and topics to discuss?
I just want to make sure I have some other CTE colleagues on the call, and I've talked a lot today. So I just want to make sure that I didn't speak for them and that, there was something that is missed. I want to make sure they have an opportunity if there's something that they wanted to add, since they were invited guests today.
Robin, I think you hit a lot of my key points. So I appreciate you just firing away and knocking everything out. So I don't think there's anything really else on my list, but thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, I don't want to assume. I invited you also. I don't want to assume that.
No, it's good. You did a great job with it.
My thoughts exactly. The things that I was wanting to be highlighted were highlighted. So appreciate your view and speaking so eloquently to it all. Thank you.
And I just want to thank you all, for this feedback. It's really informative. And, I know I will be watching the recording. In addition to, the notes that Dave is putting together, which I'm sure you all will review and, make amendments to. So I'll keep an eye out for that to be emailed over. And then I'd also encourage, anyone who, hasn't submitted the survey yet, or, something that you think of, 5 minutes from now, the next 24 hours, so forth, please just complete the survey. The link is in the PowerPoint, which I shared, and I'll also drop it in the chat as well. And again, just thank you all. Really appreciate, all of your thoughtful considerations and feedback, and the partnership here among all of you.
Thank you. Molly and Richard, I want to just publicly thank you for coming today and presenting and being authentic and transparent. I think there's no value that you can put on that. And so I felt that today. And I just want to show my appreciation to you for coming with that stance.
Thank you, Olivia. I second that. You both are great. And I know we ask a lot of tough questions. And you guys always are able to answer them with just honesty and just eloquent answers. So thank you so much.
Okay, so in the last 5 minutes, our next meeting I have for February 20th, 3 to 4:30. And we're going to be talking about CTE pathways and apprenticeship.
I think the next 3 meetings exactly are the CTE pathway, the dual enrollment in early college pathway, and the APIB Cambridge. So we're just going to, line them up. And now what I'll do is compile these notes and send them out to folks on the call and then to our Pillar 3 committee specifically. And we can make any edits so that our recommendations or suggestions and feedback can be submitted by tomorrow.
Thank you, Dave, for being our note taker.
Thanks for good ideas.
I don't know how you do it. You keep up and contribute to the conversation. So I don't know how you do it.
Agreed. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for everyone. My dog wants to speak today. So please, if there's anything else that we forgot, let us know. And we look forward to our next meeting, another robust discussion, I'm sure. And I think everyone who's invited today would also be appropriate for our next conversation. So hopefully you'll stay along for the ride.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.